Welcome back to Tibet channel. This is the and the Sanela ani who change your pay ani Sanegi Choedup University of Wisconsin ani prevail to the Jenny Naisha ani getting to Chigo and Firona.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Tibet Student Association of Madison, we want to welcome you to an evening with Namgyal, and we're incredibly grateful to see so many of you here tonight from the Madison community, the esteemed faculty and staff of UW-Madison, and especially our respected leaders and friends from the Wisconsin Student Association. And the local Tibetan community come out tonight. Your presence truly honors this occasion for us. Tonight's a big evening for our association and for our wider community. We're gathered not just to share an evening, but to share a conversation that bridges the wisdom and contemporary reality of Tibet with the global stage. Thank you to everyone who helped make this event a reality, to all the collaborators, and to our dedicated team members whose hard work and passion are the backbone of our work. And now it's my honor to acknowledge our guest. We're incredibly privileged to welcome Mr. Namgyal, the official representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for North America. A statesman, a visionary, and a voice for the Tibetan people. His presence on the UW-Madison campus is a significant moment for all of us and a testament to the enduring connection between Tibet and the world.
And I will be talking about the purpose of this evening. Tom's mission is to share the richness of Tibetan culture, to raise awareness about the challenges facing our homeland, and to serve as a supportive home for Tibetan students here at Madison. Tonight's event is a perfect embodiment of this mission. Mr. Choedup will show his insights on the Tibetan experience and its global context, offering a unique perspective that we believe will resonate deeply whether you are a student, an academic, or a community member, simply seeking a greater understanding of this pivotal cultural and political landscape. We encourage you to listen closely, to reflect, and to participate respectfully in the Q&A session that will follow his address. Thank you once again for joining us. Without further ado, please join me in offering a warm Madison welcome to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Namgyal.
Stand up and thank you, Pujila Kamala, for the kind words and introduction. So I got here around 5 from DC and had a meeting this morning at the State Department. I took this 1.5 hour flight, and I'm a bit down with the kind of like a cough, right? The AC and the flight, I don't know, did something, but I have hope I'll be okay to speak for like 30 minutes. So my name is Namgyal Choedup, and I took over the responsibility of representing His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Center Tibetan Administration to North America about 3.5 years ago. And before that, so to give a big background about myself, I'm someone who was born in one of the Tibetan refugee settlements in South India, did all my schooling in India, then worked with the Tibetan administration for about 10 years. During that time, I was able to come to the United States for a 2 years scholarship program, and I came to Brandeis University to do a master's program in sustainable international development from 1998 to 2000. Then I went back and served in Dharamsala for about 5 years. And I was a researcher on environmental development issues inside Tibet. And in summer of 2002, I was able to visit Tibet for about 3 months with my old father. And I got to spend about 3 months in Tibet. And that's when I thought I really got to go back to Tibet and do field work. So in 2006, I came to the United States, and to pursue further studies. I got into a graduate school in University in St. Louis, and my original goal was to go do fieldwork inside Tibet. But then spring protests of 2008 happened, and basically after that Tibet was locked down, so I couldn't go to Tibet to do my fieldwork. Ended up doing a PhD in anthropology, and I had to fall back on my plan B, and I ended up doing my fieldwork in one of the largest Tibetan settlements in South India. So I got my PhD degree for doing a dissertation on the Tibetan settlements in India, but that's not my, it was my plan B, something I was not really into, but I had to do something to finish my PhD. That dissertation is available open source on Kazakh. If you go look up Namgyal, Choedup, and PhD thesis, you'll see that my PhD thesis is titled From a Refugee to Transmigrants, Negotiating Cultural Continuity and the Desire to achieve upward social mobility through migration. So kind of looking at the challenges of Tibetans living in exile, trying to, preserve their identity, their cause against this desire to achieve upward socio-economic mobility through migrations. And many of you, your parents are part of that. That's my, a bit background of my work. And my work with the Office of Tibet over the past 3 years, it's been really, my whole life I've been doing research, something very deeply connected with Tibet issues. So this was kind of like a job that I really enjoy personally. And so today I would like to share brief about the work that we do in the office. Office of Tibet was established in 1963. It was established in New York. Back then, His Holiness was a temporal and political leader. He had the Tibetan government in exile. And the reason why Office of Tibet was established in New York was to lobby for Tibetan cause at the United Nations General Assembly. I'm not sure if you all know, the United Nations General Assembly passed 3 resolutions on Tibet, 1959, 1961, and 1965. Basically, those 3 resolutions talk about the human rights violation in Tibet, the systematic operation by the Communist China, and the second resolution, the 1961, did talk about the Tibetan people's right to self-determination. But overall, the United Nations basically abandoned the Tibetan cause. They never bothered to discuss about the legal status of Tibet. But there is a context to that. I'm not sure how much you know about Tibet's history. When all these nations in Africa and Asia were getting independence, we Tibetans somehow lost our country when the communist China invaded Tibet. And the reason why we lost our country, one of the main reasons is the Tibetans lived in diplomatic isolation for so long. And Tibet's own geographical, features or landscape kind of protected us for a long time. But then when this whole world was changing, we somehow anachronistically went in the other direction. And since then, and everybody knows Tibet has been under Chinese occupation. Now, since the flight of His Holiness to India in March of 1959, Communist China has ruled Tibet for the past 65 years with iron fist. That's the reality today. And the United Nations, basically, one of the largest omission is that the case of Tibet, the legal case of Tibet, status of Tibet. That's basic fact. And we have how many? Do we have how many non-Tibetans here? Except for Leo. Where are you from?
Somalia.
Somalia? Nice to meet you. Okay. So for the others, I'll ask, what is the significance of July 2nd this year? If you've been following general Tibetan news related development. Do you know what happened on July 2nd this year? Okay, you know what's the significance of this year? Huh? year of compassion again. Yeah. So July 6th, we celebrated 90th birthday of His Holiness, and the Central Tibetan Administration has officially designated His Holiness 90th year as the year of compassion. On July 2nd, His Holiness came out with a statement basically reiterating that the institution of the Dalai Lama will continue, and that when it comes to his succession, it'll be his personal estate or the Gandhimpara Trust that had the sole authority over the succession issue. So this is very significant for the Tibetan people. My office, I carry two titles of representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So His Holiness gave up all his political power in 2011, and he fully, democratized our society. But still, we are so dependent on his, his charisma, his leadership, that we have to borrow his, that position in his authority. So I carry that as a title, his representative, and the representative of the Tibetan administration, so that I can be more successful in my work. And our office of Tibet moved from New York to Washington, D.C. in 2014. The reason why the Office of Tibet moved to D.C. was United States was one of the main supporters of Tibet on the international stage, and it was seen as important that the office moved down to further strengthen United States support. That's why our office moved to Washington, D.C. And this office, North America, for this office we have two countries, United States and Canada. That's my jurisdiction. I have about 5 staffers with me. But we work very closely with the International Campaign for Tibet, an organization that was member-driven, established about 35 years ago. That also, main goal is to advocate for the Tibetan cause and that follows His Holiness vision and to support the Tibetan people. So that's the overall, role of the Office of Tibet. And Office of Tibet, in addition to advocating for support on the Hill and working with the administration, we also reach out to think tanks and educate, the American public about the Tibetan issue. That's the overall, responsibility of our office. And that said, also one important part of our job is to work with the Tibetan associations in North America. We have about now 32 Tibetan associations. You know about Wisconsin Tibetan Association. It's one of the larger Tibetan associations. And these associations are all registered under the, different states' law, and by their bylaws, these organizations are, committed towards preserving the Tibetan identity, Tibetan language, Tibetan culture, and also lobby or advocate for the Tibetan cause. So that's a part of Office of Tibet's work, liaising and working with the Tibetan associations. So recently in Minnesota, we had the 23rd North America Tibetan Association Annual Conference, where we met for about 2.5 days to deliberate over how we can work collectively on some of these key issues, advocating, lobbying for Tibet, and the Sunday weekend school, and preserving Tibetan language, culture. Those are the overall, work that we do. Now coming back to His Holiness 90th year, I did mention the significance of July 2nd, His Holiness statement. The reason why I mentioned that is Beijing has ruled Tibet for the past 65 years, but despite that, despite all their, effort to make Tibet part of China, in reality they have not really succeeded. So today, Tibet is one of the least free countries in the world. Freedom House for the 8th consecutive year has listed Tibet as one of the least free places or region in the world. And why do you think Beijing has locked off Tibet and made it so, closely monitored? We say because China's policy have basically failed, and Tibet was never part of China. despite all their development, all their material development, all their infrastructures, all the military, the security infrastructure, they haven't been able to win the hearts and mind of the Tibetan people because Tibetans believe that they're not Chinese. That's a fact. So that's, and for them, they know that Dalai Lama is kind of like the heart and soul of the Tibetan nation, Tibetan people's struggle, and they are planning to, recognize or put in 15 Dalai Lama themselves, and they think that once they control the 15 Dalai Lama, they believe that they can somehow control the Tibet issue. But we tell the Chinese that this is something that won't really work, because we give the example of the current pension Lama that was recognized by His Holiness, who's been inducted at the age of 6, and Chinese chose their own pension Lama, and they're actively trying to promote him, but he doesn't have any legitimacy in the eyes of the Tibetan people today. So we try to remind the Chinese that this plan, they're waiting for this Dalai Lama to die, and somehow, if they were able to appoint the next Dalai Lama, they were somehow able to control the Tibetan people. We say that won't really succeed. Instead, we try to tell the Chinese that the best way to resolve the Tibetan issue is to sit down with the Tibetans and talk it out and find a long-lasting solution to a dialogue. So in that sense, His Holiness' statement is really important in that he counteracted China's plan to plan their own Dalai Lama when this Dalai Lama passes away. And also, if you guys have been following the Tibetan world, recently Tibetan do a lot of Tenshuk or long life ceremony. Recently, Tibetan youths did a Tenshuk too. Have you followed that? Any of you been part of that? Have you registered for that? Anyone from Wisconsin? So I heard about 5,000 Tibetans registered for that. 12,000 showed up in Dharamsala to offer prayer and ceremony. And this is really significant because for the Tibetan struggle to continue, it's important that the younger generation, take responsibility, because this is a struggle of our people, and this has to, until it's resolved, we have to continue. So in that sense, the younger generation's engagement and involvement is very important. And so you guys didn't hear anything about July 2nd and the Youth Tenshu? Yes. Who was yes? Okay. Yeah. So that did it. Youth Gitchet is really important, and what they did was about 1,200 showed up in Dharamsala. There was the long life of prayer offering, and after that there were 3 days of festivals where youth on different themes. They had those events and tried to form that network and try to educate themselves and also form that network to continue on this, project of continuing our struggle. But for that to happen, it's really important that we know our history, we know our, the struggle. That's what I want to say. So, the Kadzis, I don't know how much I should talk about the Tibet issue. So let me put it this way, United States has been like the global champion for the Tibetan cause for a long time. And it's always been this bipartisan support, decades of bipartisan support. And His Holiness always said people who support Tibet or the Tibetan cause are not necessarily pro-Tibet or anti-China. They're basically pro-justice and pro-truth. And this is kind of like the main essence of our struggle. And His Holiness' visionary leadership has shown us a path of dignity and resilience. And His Holiness also shown us that resistance is not only possible, it can be peaceful and sustainable. He has shown us a path that our struggle is not just for the sake of just not sake for the sake of the Tibetans, but for the shared dignity of all people, including Chinese people. And that's kind of like the vision he has set. And his solution, if I'm not sure how much you know about that middle way approach, is something that's not really seeking total independence, but seeking genuine autonomy for the Tibetan people through dialogue. And that is something you see as really something that could be long-lasting, mutually beneficial, and through non-violence. He has always said that if we Tibetans take up violence, that he won't be responsible for leading the Tibetan cause. And the reason why he emphasizes non-violence is, if you look around the world today, there are so many conflicts going on. And if you look at what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, Palestine, Israel, we are expected to take sides. But the problem is, when violence is the way, there cannot be a long-lasting solution. Today, one side might be losing, but the losing side will always nurture that desire for revenge, the grievance, and it's a non-ending, never-ending cycles of violence, and never leads to long-lasting solution. And sometimes people believe non-violence is too easy, but non-violence is the most difficult path. So that's kind of like what our struggle is all about. A few days ago, I met with the person who leads this big organization that looked at working in conflict regions, dealing with authoritarian regimes. And he came back from Europe, from the Balkans. And he told me when he met people there, people still nurture grievances from like what happened 300 years ago. And they have this strong sense of, injustice and this strong desire for kind of like getting back, revenge. And when he says, look at the Tibetan struggle, he says Tibetans have struggled for the past, suffered for the past 75 years, but we Tibetans have not lost our moral clarity, our resilience, and now today, many of the world leaders are kind of like saying the value of non-violence and coming to appreciate what the Tibetan struggle is all about and how it's really relevant in today's world. So when I talked about this, someone mentioned about the Year of Compassion. So this celebration of His Holiness' 90th birthday matters not because it's about Dalai Lama, it's because it's about sharing his messages of non-violence, inter-Tibetans, universal responsibility, and that's something really needed in today's world. And so my one purpose of coming and interacting with you is trying to kind of like give you a lens or introduction to the whole Tibetan struggle and what it is all about, and how if you guys can understand that and whatever professional fields you pursue, I believe you can really have an approach or a view, perspective that can be really beneficial, not just to the Tibetan, to the larger community. And that's one of our main goals. That Office of Tibet organized this youth workshop and capacity building where we invite young Tibetan professionals and also try to expose our younger generation, especially in the North America, to what His Holiness has always talked about, the Dabshogin, the double wing education. I mean, you guys are in one of the best public education system, so access to modern secular education, you don't have to worry. But when it comes to inner values, inner education, this is something Tibetan culture or Tibetan values can really teach you. And if you have that best of the world, then we really believe you can go out there in the world and contribute to the larger society. That's our goal, and we have those workshops. So in future, maybe we have many young people here, we can have one of those workshops. So kind of gradually expose you, introduce some of the things that we do. And so weekend school is one way through which we try to impart Tibetan language, culture, and sea learning is a big part of that, kind of like giving you that inner strength and resilience. And this is something that's really needed in today's world. So maybe I'll stop here, and maybe take questions. I'm not really good at this, talking to a larger group, so I tend to go in different, direction. But I'm totally fine with taking questions. So far, have I made any sense? Did you get part of what I was trying to say? So I'm not really sure how, I see a lot of Tibetans, but I'm not sure how much you know about Tibetans, or how much I should talk about some stuff that for many might be taken for granted, especially people who are in India or Nepal. Yeah. But for students and young people in North America, I always face this challenge about how to connect and how much you know about the whole Tibetan issue and Tibetan cause, and where to go from there. So this question and answer session, I think, would be helpful. So I'll stop here. Yeah. I need to exercise.
I can ask.
Sure, please.
I know you talked a little bit about like the middle way. Like, what are like the current obstacles to like, well, not that, but like, how do you respond to like critics within like the Tibetan community who believe like the middle way approach has like run its course like without success?
So when we say middle way, we have to understand the context where it's coming from. And Sikhyam often goes around and talks to a lot of young people of the Tibetan community talking about middle way. So middle way means there are two, extremes or two ends. So the one end, he frame it as like historical status of Tibet as an independent, or historical fact that Tibet was never part of China. Yeah. And the other end is the current reality, the systematic oppression and Tibet under tight rule by China. So in that sense, these are the two extremes, and how do we find a way where we try to address something, fears or concerns the Chinese authority might have, and to find a solution that really serves the Tibetan purpose too. Now we have also understand that middle way approach came about in late 70s or early 80s, when then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping basically said, except for independence, we can talk about everything. So that's when His Holiness came out with this proposal, and we have had 9 rounds of talks between 2002 to 2010, and right now, China under Xi Jinping, we don't see much hope. But whatever is happening right now in China, that cannot go on forever. Right now, we don't see any, any hope or any expectation for a positive response from the current regime, but that can't go forever. And ultimately, the issue of Tibet, Sino-Tibet conflict or Sino-Tibet dispute, it's something that Tibetans and Chinese have to sit down and figure it out, otherwise it'll be ongoing. So in that sense, I would say, this path that His Holiness proposed, it's really pragmatic, and it's the most realistic way forward. Now, you can go into, even more in-depth about now what is the alternative. Everybody desires independence, and His Holiness said independence are birthright. So we're not saying independence is something you shouldn't, desire, but desiring something or something against achieving something is totally different. So in today's context, we might see whether we're seeking independence or middle way, trying to find a mutually beneficial solution. It's not realistic because under Xi Jinping, it's so what you say, repressive, so stubborn, and Xi Jinping has taken China in a totally different direction. But that said, I mean, China has a lot of vulnerabilities, and Xi Jinping was recently in Tibet, so he's second time in 5 years. That kind of shows, I mean, on the one hand, China is trying to tell that it has Tibet under strong grip, but on the other hand, it shows that 65 years of its rule in Tibet, China is still so insecure about its presence in Tibet. So in that sense, I think right now, any proposal, any solution that people might come, it's not realistic when China is so belligerent, so stubborn. But that said, in future, we have to see. Yeah. Does that kind of like address? Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, please.
So, like with current day conflicts such as like the Israel-Palestine conflict, also with Ukraine and Russia, we see there's like a general partisan divide on like which parties support like what side. But also like in the parties themselves, we also see divisions, and we also see like how quickly with the shift of the presidency, attitudes towards supporting countries can change, like funding war and whatnot. Do you foresee like partisan divides as like a potential conflict in the future for the U.S.'s support of Tibet?
So, a great question, and let me put it this way. I mean, I did mention about Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Israel. This is something people living in the West, especially in the United States, know. But we don't know about all those ongoing conflicts in Africa, in Asia, Sudan, those places, Burma, and some of these, yeah. But somehow in today's world, even violence, some cases get more visibility. And non-violence is something that doesn't get covered and talked today. So we try to tell now the media too, think tanks too, about how sometimes media has a role in that, paying attention to those violent struggles, getting them. And people kind of believing that somehow this is kind of new normal there. And now your question about parties thing, I think since you're an American citizen, someone who might be, I'm not sure how much you follow all this political development. Violence, Russia war now, Russia, Ukraine, this is the third year, is it? And Palestine, Israel, after October 7th, it's in the second year. We don't see any, likely possibility of it coming to an end. I can see more violence. So in that sense, I'm not being cynical, I'm not being pessimistic, but if things have to change, then people have to really understand that violence is not the answer, and the international community has to somehow realize that. Otherwise, we run the risk of history repeating itself, and that's the world we live in today. So really, I don't have any simple answer, but this exercise is also our way of first educating ourselves about our struggle and the value of nonviolence, not engaging in hatred, desire for revenge, because that's a never-ending cycle of more violence. In that sense, what His Holiness has taught us is something very similar to many great moral leaders of our times have taught. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela. They have basically said violence is never the answer. The desire for revenge, desire to solve problems through violence will never lead to peace, stability. It will lead to more violence, more revenge. But in today's world, it looks like we are kind of repeating history when we think that military might is the answer. Does that kind of address what you're trying to say? Yeah. So in that sense, I mean, I didn't get to talk too much about what His Holiness had done for the Tibetan people there. And His Holiness was here in the United States last year. He came, he's now 90, he came last year to have knee replacement, surgery. Since he came for physical health reason, he didn't have any public engagement. But the United States government provided all the security and the protocol service. He was coming back to the United States after like 7 years. And so it was my responsibility to work with the State Department and all the protocol. And there were many, there were few officials who have worked on His Holiness visit in the past, but many of the, diplomatic security service, they were all new. They didn't know much about His Holiness. And they were asking me, who is this person? Because the reception he got at the airport in New Jersey airport and the hotel, they were really amazed. And the best thing I could tell some of these young officials was, he's like Martin Luther King, Pope, Gandhi, all rolled into one person. Yeah. That's the best I could do. And in that sense, we need the younger people's help. See, sometimes I come from this first generation who grew up in India, with the settlements and served the Tibetan cause. But now we're dealing with a younger generation who lived totally in a different environment. So in that sense, kind of like articulating and speaking to connect with the younger generation is a challenge for our generation. So in that sense, we need your help. We can share the Tibetan cause, the vision that His Holiness has set for us. And this is something we believe is really relevant today. But you people are the best ambassadors, best messengers of that message, because you can talk to your generation. So we kind of like believe that today's generation has a huge, huge role in that sense. I mean, if you see those student protests all over the campus, that's great. But then to kind of sustain that, to have real impact, you need to have a really bigger picture understanding of some of the realities. I mean, young people, they have a lot of energy, a lot of passion, but then you have to understand the larger geopolitical reality and the real politics. And if we understand that, and we realize that violence is not the answer, then we can come up with solutions that can lead to really change that, bring about positive change to the current humanity. Yeah. That's what I believe. It was a long-winded answer, but did it address your question? Or you can follow up with the
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm like not as informed as I should be about like Tibetan politics specifically in America. Have there been like any general party trends on like who supports the Tibetan cause, and like do you think that could be a conflict in the future?
So let me tell you one thing, something that His Holiness has often advised us. Even if you you have access to internet, you go online. He gave a talk to Tibetan youths in Wisconsin, I guess, 10 years ago. It's still on our website, it's available there. He talked to young people like you back then, and he touched on all the politics. Yeah. So His Holiness, when he was only 25 years old, when he came to India, and he had this huge responsibility of leading the Tibetan people. And from that time onward, he really tried to advocate for Tibet's cause at the United Nations. And Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the then Indian Prime Minister, advised His Holiness that the United States or any other country, no country will fight for Tibet's cause or independence. It's only the Tibetans who will do that. And he told His Holiness that the best bet is on your younger generation, the education of the younger generation. That's the advice given to His Holiness back then, and His Holiness said he took it as a mantra. So we value, we admire, we always will remain grateful for the support of the United States government or any other government. But in the end, it's we Tibetans have to figure out how to find a solution to the problem that we have with China. It's only sitting down with the Chinese people that we can find a long-lasting solution. But this support helps. Support helps to bring sense to the Chinese leadership. Yeah. So in that sense, in our office, because of His Holiness' vision, is always making a point to reach out to the Chinese, society, common people. So whenever he used to visit the United States, he always made it a point to reach out to the Chinese students. And through that, a responsibility of our office, we have a China director who reach out to, Chinese scholars, dissidents. And this is something you guys can also do as a time or student for Tibet. When I first took over, I reached out to them and I said, if they want to strengthen or do more on the campus, we are always there to support them. And reaching out to the mainland Chinese student is not easy, but this is a very important part of having that human-to-human dialogue and trying to, because in the long run, Tibetans and Chinese have to find a solution. So party support is great, United States support is great, as I've mentioned, always been bipartisan when it comes to Tibet. But then any country will treat its own national interest first. So Tibet issue has always been seen as like a human rights thing. So whenever it's convenient, the real politics, the national interest kind of overrides everything. But then we don't have a choice. We appreciate the support and we work on what we have. So far, the United States Congress has been really supportive. If you look at the law that passed last year, it's really building up on the past 3 laws that we have. One important part of that law is that the Tibetan as a people have the right to self-determination, and also counter China's historical claim that Tibet has always been part of China. And the law says the United States never takes the position that Tibet has always been part of China. So this is really important to kind of point out to the Chinese that they don't have any legitimacy over their presence in Tibet. The only way they can get legitimacy is sit down with the Tibetan people. It's His Holiness or his representative or the democratically elected leadership and find a solution. And through that only we can get legitimacy. So that's how we kind of like look at it. So support will come and go, but ultimately this support is meant to bring Beijing to the table, to sit down with the Tibetans and talk about Tibet issue in good faith. And in today's context, we are looking more at other countries. United States has done so far, but under the current administration, it has its own foreign policy, more kind of like America first. So we don't see how much space we have to push, but we kind of like built on whatever they have done so far, and then work with European countries, Japan, Korea, Canada, and other countries to put pressure to reach out to the Chinese leadership to bring some common sense, sanity back into that process.
People do like 1 or 2 more questions. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions?
I know that you mentioned with the recent birthday of His Holiness reaching 90th and like his talks about his reincarnations. I know you didn't mention about that, but could you touch on how the Tibetan government as a whole is going to like counter the efforts of China trying to interfere with the reincarnation of His Holiness?
That's a great question. I was going to talk about it. So I did mention when His Holiness was only 25 years old when he came to exile, and he started 3 projects back then: Tibetan settlements, Tibetan schools, and then Tibetan cultural and monastic institutions. And those 3 projects are the main reason why we Tibetans have been so, resilient and continuing our cause, and also in preserving our language, our identity. And democracy is another big part of His Holiness' vision. Right from the beginning, he said, the only way forward is to democratize the Tibetan society. And we Tibetans always ask him to continue, please, you lead us. We don't want democracy. But it means gradually. In 2001, that's when we had the first directly elected political leadership. Back then, His Holiness used to say, I'm in semi-retirement. Kalan Tripa was the post of that. It was directly elected in 2001. Sangdong Rinpoche served for 2 terms. In 2011, His Holiness then fully devolved political power. And His Holiness said democracy is the way to go forward. And democracy, practice of democracy, not just lip service, in reality. And we have a functioning democratic system in our exile. And this is our main soft power. And this is the best gift we can give to the Tibetan people inside Tibet. And His Holiness has made it very clear a long time ago. He said the Central Tibetan administration of the Tibetan government in exile will continue until the Tibetan issue is resolved. Once the Tibetan issue, Sino-Tibet issue, is resolved, the people inside Tibet will decide what kind of future governance they want to have. Until then, we Tibetans and the Central Tibetan administration, which is regarded as the legitimate, representative authority by the Tibetan inside Tibet, and also in our exile, has this moral responsibility. But once Tibet issue, we come to sort of an arrangement with the Chinese about the future of Tibet, then people inside Tibet will decide, and democracy is the best gift we can give. And when you talked about all this influence, Beijing has been really great at not just with us in the West, to their influence operation, elite capture, sowing discord, and those false narrative propaganda using algorithm. That's something been happening with the Tibetan community too. And to give you a larger context, in the early years after we came into exile, it was not the People's Republic of China or the Communist China that was doing that. It was Taiwan, Republic of China, that was doing that through their Tibetan Mongolian Affairs Commission. Because back then, both Taiwan and China had this rivalry, enmity about who is the legitimate ruler of China. And both of them wanted to make Tibet part of, modern China. And for Taiwanese, they were trying to recruit Tibetan religious leaders, Tibetan leaders. Aim was to fight against the communists and also recruit them to make Tibet as part of the, their own, vision. But Taiwanese, after it became more democratic, they closed down that office. They don't do that propaganda. Influence in the Tibetan community. Taiwan has become now more supportive of Tibetan independence and freedom movement because it's now become a fully democratic society. But now it's the communist China because it has the resources, both economic, military, technological, and it's been trying to spread its, influence in our community. And over the past many years, we have seen that, how social media is really used, not just in our community, in the larger Western world, how China has really taken advantage of advantage of the liberal societies, their freedom, and try to use that to sow their propaganda or influence in our community too. But I believe over the past few years it has kind of settled down now. We Tibetans have become now more wise, trying to able to see that how these elements on social media, many of them, we see them for what they're doing. So in that sense, for us, democracy, transparency is the best, tool against that. And our civil society needs to be really active. So we do have Tibetan Center for Human Rights, Student for Free Tibet is also part of that, Tibetan Action Institutes, and there are other NGOs in India. These are very important, and media is also very important part of that, to make sure that the society is really transparent and accountable too. So China will keep continuing doing that, but I don't think it'll succeed because, as someone said, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So as long as our society is really transparent, really open about what the administration is doing, as a whole is doing, and democracy, practice of democracy. And democracy is not easy. Democracy is messy. No wonder Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except that we have tried all. So His Holiness, if you read his work, in one of his work, he's written so many books, Ethics for the New Millennium. I'm reading one right now. This is a little more, deeper. But he has said, I'm quoting him, he has said, you might have the best system of checks and balances, you might have best laws, but it is only good as people who are in charge. Here we are talking about the moral integrity, the principle of the leaders. And if that's lacking, democracy won't save us. So in that sense, our democracy, because of His Holiness leadership, that's something we are trying to do. So, yeah, does that kind of like address what you, and some, they are biomedical student that did what? This is what I read on the flight. I read half of it. How science and spirituality can serve the world. So when His Holiness talks about Buddhist culture, Buddhist values, it all comes from Buddhism, not as a religion, but as some knowledge that someone gave us about 2,500 years ago. Someone named Gautam Siddhartha, who was born in that Indian subcontinent. And his teachings, his wisdom, his knowledge is something we Tibetans have preserved. And that knowledge is lost in the land that it took birth, not all of India, but we Tibetans, 7th to 9th century, really, our ancestors, our former, rulers, imported that, translated everything, and somehow we practice it, preserve it, and His Holiness is talking about that knowledge. And if you guys have that knowledge and modern secular education, that can be not just for Tibetans, it can be global influence and global leaders. That's our vision. But I'm not putting any pressure on you. This is kind of like an introduction to you, and it's always helpful to read more. Have any of you read His Holiness' latest memoir, Voice for the Voiceless? Only 100 and something pages, right? Very easy to read. His Holiness written 3 memoirs, My Land and My People, right after he came into exile. Very easy reading. And then in the 90s, he wrote Freedom in Exile, and this is his latest memoir. So if you want to know a brief history of Tibetan struggle, Tibetan cause, this is really helpful. Then if you want to go deeper, there are books like this. Those who are in science, psychology, these are really helpful. And when he talks of Dapsho Nyinde, this is the Tibetan word. Dapsho is wing, Nyinde is 2 wing. Secular, modern secular education and those inner values, Tibetan ancient wisdom, ancient Indian wisdom, then you guys can be really global influencers or leaders in the right sense, not in those materialistic thing, but in really contributing and bringing about positive change, not just to the Tibet, to this humanity. So Leo and you, do you have any questions? More than happy to answer. I've been talking to basically Tibetan. So if you feel like my talk was kind of like not really towards you guys, more than happy to answer any questions you might have. Any questions? Please, Maya.
I have a question. Kind of like what you were talking about with like propaganda and how a lot of people, not only like Chinese from the mainland or like students here, but Americans and people around like in North America have this like view or what they have basically learned just from that propaganda. Like how do you, like do you have any advice on how we should approach conversations with people that like we want to educate them, but like when someone's so like far in with propaganda, it can be kind of hard to have that conversation.
Great question. And then again, I would say I don't have a simple answer. I face similar challenges when I was came to United States to do 98 to 2000 a master's program. We had a Chinese student. We always kind of like, I wouldn't say argue, have this exchange. And it was really hard to get through. But then, kind of like trying to understand where they're coming from too, and also understanding your history is really helpful. And everybody will have their own say. Because they grew up in, especially mainland Chinese students, it's really unfortunate that they have been given one version or a standardized version of history. Because we heard now today high school kids or graduates in China doesn't know anything about what happened on June 4th, 87, right? 89. Tiananmen Square, it's a big thing. But Chinese students, many of them don't know because the international structure. So we have to also understand that. We just can't expect them to respond because they haven't been exposed. And this is a challenge we have in our community too, especially people who grew up in Tibet or under Chinese system. Their whole idea of political science, social theory, only one-sided. The leftists, Marxists, Leninists, and they don't have any exposure to the whole range. And they have really kind of like very one-sided view of, I mean, even towards religion and many of those traditional institutions. But we have to also understand where they're coming from. So it's not really easy, but listening is helpful. I'm not getting too emotional. And also listening to some of what's that. Exposing or educating oneself is also very important. So many of you came here because you are Tibetan or Tibetan heritage, but we fully understand you grew up here, so you were not born in that society where you don't have to learn. You grew up, you were enculturated. That environment, that the Tibetan language, culture is everywhere. But you guys didn't grow up in that environment. The best thing you had was the Sunday weekend school. So in that sense, don't beat yourself, but it's always helpful to read, and especially the latest memoir, 150 something pages, very simple English, and His Holiness basically laid out what he has tried to, what he has done over the past 70 something years to talk to the Chinese, and also his future was vision and his expectation, and how we Tibetans shouldn't lose our hope as long as we follow that vision. As long as we don't lose our moral clarity, and even if our struggle goes for another few decades, we should be fine. But once we lose that moral clarity, then no matter if it's only a few years, even if we were to get our independence tomorrow, but if we're not really capable of running our own country, then because I talk to a lot of students, because when I did my master's program, we have a lot of students, international students from conflict region, from like Eritrea, Ethiopia, Palestine, Israeli, Sinhali, and Sri Lankan. We talk about all this issue, and sometimes I tell them, you guys have been independent for so long, you're wasting that precious opportunity. But some of my friends, when we have this debate, they say, you Tibetans, if you get your independence tomorrow, you might be fighting like us too on religion or regional thing. So in that sense, His Holiness' vision is really, I mean, once you understand that, then you can accept or reject, but it will help you improve your own understanding. That's the best I can say. And don't beat yourself up when someone doesn't respond the way you expected. Listening takes, I mean, it takes a lot of listening and understanding. And it's not easy. And social media is a huge challenge, really huge challenge, not just to this country too. Because there was a time when people read news from like newspapers, printed radios, television, but after internet came, no regulation. So it's basically left up to the readers to basically. So now there is no liability. Back then, newspapers just can't print bullshit. If you do that, they are liable as a publisher. But internet, no regulation in the name of freedom of expression, You can write anything, say anything. So it's left up to the readers to decide what is fake, what is true. And now there's so much spin going on. You don't know what's true or what is false. So this is the state we are in. And there's a saying, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but not to fact. So fact checking is really important. But in today's context, the fourth pillar, media, is really not there. Because the mainstream media is also can with the system join the system. So for there to stay even, they're also engaging in sensationalization. And this is why those outrageous things, violent things get covered, but not the true human grit stories, resilience, those non-violence that really can bring about long-lasting change. This is something nobody covers and nobody pays attention. So this is the time we live in. So you guys have more responsibility, but I'm not putting more in the plate, but kind of like giving you that added perspective to how to understand the reality and not just taking it by the spin of the talk.
Thank you so much.
I hope it was helpful and the Kiran Tibet, at some point I'll connect you to our youth outreach, and in future we do a lot of those workshops.
So there's some events
Yeah,
happening.
Magic, yeah, they're doing some great work. And oh, you're having Magic, Minnesota, right?
Yeah, and then
It's just good to go there and get. It's not only you going for same what's the challenges. You meet other Tibetans and through that you build that network, even friendship, and inspire each other. Be engaging with one. So thank you so much. Yeah, I hope the career was helpful interaction. Yeah.
thank you everybody for coming. I also wanted to say that the CTA is also having the 2025 Youth Leadership Workshop as well. So that's like a great way to meet Tibet people and see what you can do.
This is too far away. It's San Francisco, Toronto, but this summer we couldn't do because of the 90th birthday. But they'll Portland, Wisconsin, you guys come up with sort of a plan, and we will bring some resource person, and yeah, kind of like a 2 days, 3 days interaction. Yeah, Lolo. Leo, you had a question? Mine? No? Anything?
Come back to you. Come back to you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll also be hosting a Losar